Hello again, folks. I'm your host for Unlocking the Club, Angela Taylor. And today, Mia, Bev, and I are going to unlock the club on a few different topics, from entrepreneurship to mindfulness to working remotely, and honestly, whatever tangential topics that come up during our sister talk. It's going to be fun being back in the same podcast space with my Game Changers Live crew. And so look forward to introducing this segment to you all as well. I'm actually really looking forward to talking to Bev and Mia about entrepreneurship. All three of us are entrepreneurs and have been for what feels like over a decade. And so I know we have a lot of similarities in our journey and a lot of differences and a lot to share with those of you who may be considering starting your own venture, pursuing your passion project, or whatever else it may be. And I know, speaking for myself, I'm not in enough of these conversations on a regular basis that actually could help Black women unlock financial freedom and flexibility while also regaining control of their lives and the amount of time that they put into their jobs. I am, however, frequently in conversations with college friends, my cousins spouses, coaching clients, and others who aren't happy working for someone else, or who actually may be happy in the job that they're in. They're just not fulfilled. The latter was me. I loved what I was doing. I was in sports and entertainment for about 20 years, predominantly with the WNBA, the Women's National Basketball Association. And I was really passionate about what I was doing and the opportunities we were creating for women to be able to play the sport that they loved here in the United States. But I just wanted to find something else that I was passionate about. I wanted to have the work that I was actually doing on a daily basis and all the time that I was spending in the office actually have a direct impact on people's futures in different ways than I was having an impact at the WNBA. And so I think often of my entrepreneurial journey, and it's been a roller coaster, to say the least. And want to share a little bit of that with you over the course of the conversation and hear more from Mia and Bev about what their journey has been like as well. A lot of data says, recently I actually was reading an article that talked about pre-COVID, the majority of entrepreneurs were Black women, right? That the growth in entrepreneurship was predominantly for Black women. And unfortunately, due to COVID and what we all have experienced over the last couple of years, Black women have been negatively impacted by COVID on their businesses, mainly because most of the businesses that Black women, and not all, but most of the businesses that Black women own are service-oriented businesses, and that was a direct hit on our businesses over the last couple of years. I'm actually launching a course called How to Build and Grow a Seven-Figure Business this fall, so stay tuned. But it was a result of a lot of the conversation I was having with folks who felt stuck in their jobs for a number of reasons because they couldn't leave. There was consistent income. There was a lot of uncertainty. They weren't sure what entrepreneurship would be like. There was a fear of failure. They were risk averse. I know that was me. I was risk averse my entire life. I wanted to play it safe. I needed that steady income. I needed benefits, all of those different things that matter. I had limited capital. The money and the income that I was earning was what I needed to live on. I didn't have any excess income to waste, or so to say. And honestly, no one in my circle, at least in my immediate circle, had done this, had been an entrepreneur. And I remember on a previous episode with Cheryl Burrell, she talked about how so much of her journey in corporate America was informed by the fact that her father actually was an entrepreneur. She got to see him operating in that domain, and that was helpful to her in her career. And I think, unfortunately, for some of us, we don't have access to somebody who's done this. And that learning journey is invaluable, and it may lead some of us to actually stop or hesitate or avoid actually taking the leap into entrepreneurship. The fear of failure is huge. I want to talk to Bev and me about this a little bit too. The fear of failure and the elevated expectations that we have as graduates of Stanford University played a huge role in my hesitation to get out into entrepreneurship. I think there was this expectation of whatever title you had or your career trajectory being a certain way when you have a pedigree from an institution such as Stanford, or you have expectations from your family, and the fear of failure is too much for you to actually want to overcome in those situations. So there were a lot of reasons why I know I didn't venture out on my own. And I'm sure that there are a lot of other people that are hesitating to actually get into entrepreneurship as well. But now that I have been, I'm tapping back into that urge I had when I was a little girl in Mountain Home, Idaho, and would beg my mother when we went to the King's department store. I would literally beg her for us to go down the aisle where they had the little coin packets, and they would have like those little receipt books that have the carbon copies so you can write receipts and give them out. I love to have those little receipt books and pretend like, when I was selling my teddy bear to my brothers or something like that. So I got that bug when I was a little girl, but it wasn't what I saw others in my purview doing. And so I went with what everyone else was doing. Again, put my head down, worked hard, got good grades, got an education, and found a job that was paying the bills. But then there was a point when I was actually in business school at NYU where actually Beverly and one of my good friends from business school and I entered a social venture business competition, and we actually won. We won this competition for a concept we had around virtual campus visits, and knowing that there are kids that don't have the opportunity or the resources to be able to go visit a college campus, and that actually going and setting your foot on a college campus could help you feel like you belong there and that that's the place you wanted to go. So we had this venture. We actually ended up winning $50,000 in this business plan competition. And I think that is when I actually started to believe in myself, but there's still so much I didn't know. I didn't know how to get from A to Z, how to actually go from the idea or the concept to building a successful business. But there was one conversation I had which determined that I couldn't avoid getting into entrepreneurship. And this was when I was an executive with the Minnesota Lynx. And one of the things that I actually enjoy about being in the mainstream in corporate America is when you pick up the phone and you make a phone call and you can say that I'm an executive with the WNBA, people are going to pick up or return your phone call. And that doesn't always happen as an entrepreneur. So I was addicted to that. But I picked up the phone on behalf of a friend of mine who was looking to get into looking for a head coaching job, and had been a successful assistant coach at the Division I level for years. And an opening came up that she was really interested in. And so I picked up the phone and called the college athletic director. And literally a couple hours later, he called me back. And as I was having a conversation with this gentleman, he said, "Look, Angela, I appreciate you calling me, but my priorities are our football program and our men's basketball program, our revenue generating programs. I don't have time to go find the best women's basketball coach. I just have time to find women's basketball coaches who's going to be good enough, who's not going to cause any problems for me. And I don't have to worry about the program, even if it means that we're average." I didn't know this guy from anybody. And he was that candid with me. I can't imagine what conversations he had with people he actually knew if he was going to share that with me. And it was in that moment that I realized that it wasn't good enough for me to sit on the sidelines. I actually had to be part of this conversation. I had to help women get ready for those jobs. And I had to be a part of the conversation to enlighten people that are making hiring decisions to close those gaps. So that was the catalyst for my first venture, if you will, Network Sports Consulting, and led to the Burrell Taylor Leadership Institute for Women and People of Color. So there's a lot of different reasons we all get started in entrepreneurship. And I'm really curious to find out more about how both Beverly and Mia got into entrepreneurship as well, and how they've handled this virtual workspace that we've been in over the last couple of years, as well as really actually being in wellness in that process. And engaging in mindfulness. So thanks for joining us on this episode of Sister Talk on Unlocking the Club. Our special guests on today's episode are Beverly Oden and Mia Jackson.
Welcome to the Unlocking the Club podcast, where we host honest and direct conversations about journeys of access, personal truth, and reclaiming space. We share our truth so that you can find the key to own your truth, honor your journey, and reclaim your space. grab your keys, your wallet, your phone, and invite your friends to meet you at the club. Here's your host, Angela Taylor.
On today's episode of Unlocking the Club, we're going to have a little sister talk with my co-hosts Beverly Oden and Mia Jackson. Both of these amazing humans are a joy to be in conversation with. So I'm excited to invite you into our sister talk, which we have on a regular basis, maybe not as much as we used to when we were co-hosts of Game Changers Live. But here's a little bit about my co-hosts for today's episode. In addition to being a co-host for Sister Talk on Unlocking the Club, Mia is the owner and founder of Doro Marketing Service, a firm that focuses on building brands that are committed to mindful missions. A passionate baker and sports enthusiast, Mia is also our resident member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority. Mia and I are joined by Sister Talk on Unlocking the Club co-host Beverly Oden. Beverly is an Olympian, journalist, entrepreneur, and counselor. A lifelong beach enthusiast, Bev has a passion for sports, cycling, pets, and videography. Thanks for tuning in as we unlock the club with some sister talk with two of my favorite Stanford alums and fellow members of the Chocolate Cardinal, Mia Jackson and Beverly Oden. All right, here on Unlocking the Club with my co-hosts, Beverly Oden and Mia Jackson. Mia and Bev, how are you both doing?
Doing fine.
Doing fine, just fine?
Just fine right now. I don't have corona like a lot of my friends, so I'm good. I guess I'm good.
I hear you. It's simple little things these days that make sure that we're doing well. And it feels like so many people are experiencing and getting COVID these days as the country opens back up. So glad you're doing all right. Bev, how about yourself?
Great, beautiful day here in Southern California. Got to take a walk this morning, so I'm feeling good. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Well, this feels a little bit like deja vu, maybe with a little bit more technology from 2012 or 2013 when the three of us used to host what I consider a first of its time podcast called Game Changers Live, where we talked about sports from the perspective of three women who know a lot about sports, but wanted to get beyond just the score, right? And what happened on the court or the field, but what was going on inside of the minds of the athletes, what is going on in society around those sports. And I think our last episode was actually on Andrew Luck when he suddenly retired. I was devastated. I was at the Idaho State Fair when Bev texted me, and for the next 24 hours, I didn't know what to do with myself. But it's been a minute since we shared the mic, and I would love to hear what each of you remember about those GCL Game Changers Live days. Mia, how about you?
What I remember most is that they were spirited. Our conversations were always very lively, and there wasn't a lot of blank airtime. I'll put it that way. We had a lot to say, but I always thought that we would always dig deep. So that was the best thing about it. We would dig deep, and we weren't afraid to disagree with each other. To this day, I don't know why Bev didn't like my favorite Laker player, but that's okay. Hopefully she's back with us now. So, it was great. It was a great time.
Yeah, it was. There were some good days and a lot of spirited conversations for sure, because we were very passionate about our perspectives and our stances. And about the welfare of the athletes, I think, was the commonality that we had from whichever perspective we came from. Beverly, how about you? What do you remember about those days on Game Changers Live?
The same as Mia, actually. I loved that we took on really hard conversations a lot, things that people weren't really digging deep into. We all have our different, I love that we all have our different the places that we come from, right? So you've been in the front office, you've also been an athlete. I was an athlete and a fan. Mia was just a all around everything, right? And so it was so interesting to hear each of our different takes on different subjects. And man, we had some great guests. Condoleezza Rice, remember?
Yeah.
We had Bomani Jones on. Mm-hmm. We had all these great people.
And they wanted to come back.
Yeah, I know. It was beautiful. I feel like we spawned that new show with what's her name?
Which new show? There feels like there's a bunch of new shows now with women that are leading it, right? So there's Her Take, First Take, Her Take now. as well as some other shows that are highlighting women as the main voices for sports.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of ushered that in, and so so we can all just pat ourselves on the back for having been one of the first to do that.
Yeah, well, and I think the thing was that we were really good at what we did. We had some amazing guests. We had great conversations. The guests that were on the show, the people that were listening to that podcast had great feedback. And right, we didn't take it to the next level. And I think that actually is the conversation around entrepreneurship is, I don't know about you both, but I don't know how seriously I took myself, didn't promote it heavily because you weren't quite sure if it was as good as it actually was. There was all this second guessing, right? These saboteurs that got in the way of us actually taking that concept, which I do believe is one of the first of its kind, to the next level. Is that the case for you, Wolf? Like, did you have that sense? What got in the way of us going from, here's an idea, we had a lot of fun, we enjoyed it, it was hard work, right? And it maybe wasn't our main thing, but we never got it over that hump and we just kind of let it go away.
I think that was the primary reason. We never really monetized it. We didn't, because it wasn't a go-to for all of us. We all had other ventures, other things that we were taking care of, businesses that we were taking care of. So it was that thing that we did on the side. It was the side hustle, but we did it so well that we probably should have pushed it over the hump because it was, as you say, was innovative and refreshing for the industry, I think. And that's why I guess did love it so, because they weren't coming on and getting the stereotypical questions that they would get, hey, what do you think about that pass? It didn't happen. So I think it was just a matter of timing and also understanding the space. I don't think we understood the space as well as we could have or needed to in order to grow. I won't say should have. I think we did what we were supposed to do, but what we needed to do, the things we needed to learn, we knew enough of it to be good, didn't learn enough of it to push it to the next level.
Yeah. Bev, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I remember we were all doing a lot of things at that time. We all had our hands in a lot of different pots. I know I was coaching, I was trying to run a business, I was squeezing it in, At that point, I might have had a couple different businesses going on, right? So it was rough to fit in what we would have needed to do to take it to the next level. And that honestly has never been my strong suit, the marketing piece, And so Mia is a marketing extraordinaire, but for me, that's not where I do my best work. And so just being an entrepreneur has kind of illuminated where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, And I recognize that's one of my weaknesses. So it's just, I like for word of mouth to just kind of bring people to the table and people are just coming out of their own will instead of pushing it out. And so that's how I've generally worked. And that's not always the best way to do stuff. So for me, it wasn't my strong suit. And also I had a ton of other things going on and I know we all did. So
yeah, I think you both hit on something really important. As solopreneurs, right? We put so much pressure on ourselves with whatever our main thing was. And our main thing may have been 10 other things, right? When we got to this podcast as well. And I know for myself, I was not comfortable asking for help. I wanted to do it all. I wanted to be really good at podcasting. So I wanted to figure out all the elements of podcasting. And I didn't have time to figure out all the elements of podcasting. And no one does. And most entrepreneurs, they start to hit their stride and their businesses start to grow when they ask for help. And I think as a Black woman, I think as someone who, right, is an achiever, I got in my own way of maybe not thinking that I could afford to ask for help and have somebody compensated for doing the little things that I couldn't do. But I also got in the way of wanting to learn it all. So I could be great at X, Y, and Z, not just at A, B, or C. Bev, you've had multiple businesses as well. What gets in the way of you being successful?
Yeah, so I think it's that piece of tooting your own horn, which I'm not great at. And I also agree with you. There is a bit of not wanting to ask for help, but for me, it's like another level of, I don't like sharing stuff, right? So it's like, yeah, so you bring somebody in and now they've got all their ideas and now you're doing the whole, I like it to be my idea and I want to go where I want to go. And so while I knew like maybe a partnership would have been better for me, like emotionally and physically, all sorts of health wise, I felt like that would have kind of diluted my vision, right? So I'm like the vision person. I'm like, this is the way I want it. I want it like this. And so the asking for help piece, it's I know I can't do everything, but I'd almost rather do it myself than bring someone in. And so that I think that has been a big struggle for me, and kind of learning how to like incorporate people and not let it like diminish the vision.
Yeah. Well, and I heard that, like, right, not wanting to share, like, right, or risk your idea either going in the wrong direction or someone stealing your idea shows up a lot. But what I also heard from what you just said reminds me of a quote that one of our Unlocking the Club guests, Shantara Hardy, said during an episode conversation, was that perfection is expensive. And what I heard from you, Bev, there was a little bit about like when we want to do all the things, we actually want to be very good at everything, which means that we aren't great at all the things sometimes. And that perfection, I think, is just, it's helped you get to where you are, an elite athlete, an Olympian, Stanford graduates, have your master's in journalism. And right, as entrepreneurs, there's a lot of mess that shows up. Mia, does that show up for you? Like perfection is expensive, and where has it cost you opportunities?
Oh, many. But I also want to go back to something that you said, Bev. There's a part of it being your own that you cling to. The thing, I feel like it's the thing that makes you want to be an entrepreneur in the first place is the thing that you feel you have to give up in order to do it well at a certain point. And that's the hard part. The only reason we're doing this is because it gives us control and flexibility over our lives and the things that we want to be a part of. So the minute you have to bring someone else in, you're like, but it's not going to look like I want it to look, and my control is going to leave a little bit. So, I'll just stick with it back, over here on the back burner. Not really putting yourself forward, not really pushing yourself out there. And I know that when we were doing Game Changers Live, I also had Sideline Pass, which was, again, one of the first sites for women's sports folk. And it was going really well. And then it just started to evolve because I started to let people get in. And then I fell back because I felt like I lost the control. And then you lost the reins, right? So that's a space where you, just like you said, you're sitting there and you're like, well, wait a minute. It's not looking like I envisioned. So is it mine anymore? And all of those things have a point. And then there is the actual money part, where you do have to sit there and say, at which point, the law of diminishing returns, how much am I really making for spending the time in this? And does it make sense? What else do I need to invest to push it either over the limit, to the next level? Or do I say, you know what, that was a great run, and accept it and enjoy it? So there's a lot of thought that has to go into it. I don't think it's as simple as, it's just cost, because I think all of us, all three of us, if there's something that we felt that strongly about, we'd find a way to finance it. But, it's managing that feel with the control issue, the letting go, all of the things that, again, made us want to be entrepreneurs in the first place, the passion that we have around whatever it is we do.
Yeah, you just said some words there, Mia. And I saw here on camera and on screen, Bev and I had some smiles on our face. There's a couple of things I want to unpack and want to dig into with both of you a little bit. One was around control, one was around money and financing, because we all know that Black women are at the bottom of the list of folks that will get access to capital, right? We know some people that have in our circles that have some dynamic ideas and concepts that will change the world, and they don't get access to capital. And someone has a bad idea and they get capital, like they're stumbling over capital the next day. So I want to talk about money, but before we get to that, control, you hit me in the heart right there with control, because I'm like looking myself in the mirror lately and realizing, right, how can I actually be okay with not having control over everything? And I get curious for each of you, and I wonder, of wanting to be great at whatever it is that you're doing also feeds into that energy of, if it's not done my way, it's not done the right way. And being able to let go and let somebody else do it another way is the most difficult thing that I've experienced in entrepreneurship as I've tried to scale my businesses. It was going from, you know what, it may be done differently, but it may actually be more efficient, or it may be better. I have to let go, and there may be mistakes that are made. And honestly, some people are going to be better at marketing than I am at marketing. So let me focus on the things that I'm good at. But the thing that reminded me of this was where my mom and I would butt heads in the kitchen. And y'all know I'm not in the kitchen very often. It's maybe to fix a bowl of cereal or some pasta. But we would butt heads in the kitchen where, like, you know, our moms, like, right, they have a way that they've been cooking a dish and it's been passed down in generations. And here I am, like, I'm trying to be the most efficient thing in the kitchen that gets it done and it's edible. And we would butt heads about how things should be done. And I'd be like, Mom, I get it, but I can do it another way as well. And it was so frustrating that the same outcomes and just done different ways. And we don't communicate very well in that regard, because we think that our way is the only way. Bev, has that showed up in your professional career as well as your entrepreneurial career? How have you seen yourself not being willing to give up control, and what would you say you've learned from that?
Ooh, wow, there was a lot in there.
Yes.
I will say I have been in the kitchen with my mother too and had that same experience. My mother has a very specific way of doing things as well. And she gets very frustrated when I do it another way. Like, it's just not okay, right? This is not the way it's done. And I do think we inherited a little bit of that, right? Like about doing things our way.
A lot of that.
You know?
Yes, most of
Right?
it.
So I noticed though that now that I'm kind of transitioning into a new career in counseling, I have noticed that part of what I have to do is release control in order to be good at this, right? Because it's when you're trying to control a session, it's different than when it's coming from them where the session is going, right? And so there's a lot of having to release to, you know, I believe in God, right? So just release to God how this is gonna go and not have my agenda, right? Like, okay, oh, she mentioned this, so I have to get on that and that, like I would in business, right? Would be like, here's my plan. This is how I'm gonna implement it, blah, blah, blah. It's like you go in there and every day is a blank slate, and you might think you're going to talk about one thing and you end up on a totally different thing, but it has value, you know? And then also going into supervision meetings where everybody can then, like, you say what happened and then they have their different opinions about, oh, you could have gone this way, you could have gone that way. And to be able to let that in and be like, actually, that's really good, you know? And there's certain things that open up in your mind when you're like, I never thought of that. That actually is a pretty cool, you know, instead of being in the defensive space where it's like, no, this is the way I did it. And I did it like that for a reason. And you know what I mean? Like, I can sometimes go there when people challenge me, right? Because that's like from my teenage years, right? No, I didn't, you know, like that, and kind of learning how to let that part of me just step back and be able to take in what other people are offering, and I can take it and do it with it what I want, right? Like, it's like, sometimes it takes me 3 days to go, she's right, it was about control, I didn't see it, you know? But eventually it seeps in if you just allow it to kind of like do its thing in you and then become your own, you know? And I think that's the difference between where I was when I first started businesses and where I'm going now.
Yeah, how about you?
Oh, definitely. I think a lot of that's just the growth and maturity as you go through the businesses. And it's just like anything else, you have to learn what you really can do and what you can't, what you're not the best at. And, you know, when you are actually impeding or hampering the progress by trying to do something your way. It's like, does this really make sense for me to do it that way? And Angela, I think you had mentioned earlier that we've been in business almost a decade. I'm going on 2 decades.
Wow.
This year will be 20 years for me doing this solo with a few gigs in between, but
Yes,
for the
yes.
most part, 20 years. And you have to look back and say, whoa, if I had told myself,
Yeah.
back then, some of these things. But by the same token, I don't want to minimize what that fire and urgency brought to us at the beginning
Yeah.
of our businesses. That push, that feeling like because again, it's just like the control thing. You have to believe that you can do it. You have to believe you know something.
Yeah.
In order to go out there and do it. Because if you don't have that confidence in the beginning, you're not going to do it.
That's so true. It's the fire and urgency that we had,
Yeah.
that we lived our life with. Like, right, there was no alternative for us in many regards. It wasn't going to be okay for us not to show up in the classroom and do the work,
Exactly.
right, to get good grades. And I think the same thing was true for us in business. There's a couple things, Mia, that you mentioned that get me really curious too. And I think back to those moments in the kitchen, again, few and far between, folks, with my mother. But I shifted as a leader in running a company as a result of those conversations. Because here's someone that I love and who loved me. And I felt so frustrated in those moments. Like, right, I would be pissed. Again, this is all relative, right? For Mia, Bev, and Angela, what pissed off shows up as. But I would be so frustrated. Like, I'm like, okay, well, then you cook it. Like, right? Like I don't want to be in the kitchen in the first place, right? So if you want to do your way. And I had to step back and be like, oh my goodness, like that could be the same feeling that someone who is working with me or for me is having, and I'm not even aware of the vibe that I'm giving off. And that certainly is not what I want to create. And so noticing how you being you, how that shows up and how that impacts everyone else and how they interact with you, right? And me, I know you're a baker, right? And so ingredients and right formulas and all those things matter. And so we have to pay attention.
It's critical. That kitchen scale that I use in the grand, you have exactly how much is it, 500 grams or no, that sort of thing. But I had the privilege of having my daughter work with me on a couple of projects. And that was definitely something where I had to realize, to your point, you're sitting there and this is somebody who loves and respects you and all of that. And she might have to say, disagree with that. And it's like, but I taught you. What do you mean? You disagree with me.
I gave you life.
Yeah, I made you. But then I had to say, you know what? I know what she's good at. And I think working with her actually helped me open up a lot because I was able to say, okay, I can trust what she did because I know who she is. And I know that she's thinking of this in a certain way, but it took a minute for me to kind of get my footing. And she told me some things that probably someone else couldn't have told me about how I interact, because I don't know if I would have heard it the same from them.
Yeah.
And so being able to hear it from your daughter, she's like, Mom, you really need to tone that down a little bit. That doesn't sound good. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? You in your head, you're like, this little chick, what you think, right? But then I had to actually sit back, take it in, and understand it. And so I was able to grow, probably just as you did from those kitchen moments with your mother.
Yeah. And you said trust. Trust is so important. We have to trust ourselves and trust ourselves enough to know, even if we make mistakes or our team members make mistakes, we'll be able to figure out how to recover. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. Again, perfection is expensive. I want to talk about money. Like we all have shared in our answers here a few minutes ago, the impact that capital and money has on our ability to be successful entrepreneurs. And I know for me, one of the things that I tell anybody that's considering starting their own business is start before you leave your job. If I had to do it all over again, and Mia, you said, like, if I had to do it all over, like, what would I do? I failed in my first business. Like, right, it's still alive, network sports consulting. I still do some things, but it wasn't as successful as I wanted it to be because I got in my own way. And because I was desperate, like I needed that to work versus working the business before I had to make it work, right? And so if I would do it all over again, I would start having clients, building relationships, doing business development when I had income coming in versus like quitting a job and starting a business and plowing through my savings account, trying to get that business up and running, right? Because you make different decisions under that circumstance. And I think I may not have been able to accelerate the process, like if I was still playing two roles and had a full-time job and was doing this on the side. But I think I would have started out on equal footing and with a stronger foundation, because I could have trusted that I had enough of a resource financially to be able to support some of those things. And I actually would have leveraged some of the relationships I had in an effort to build my side business, not in an effort just to help me stay in that job. And Bev, I'm curious for you, like, how did money play a factor in your desire to start an entrepreneurial vision or mission, or not, or the trajectory of your businesses?
Well, I didn't have any money to start. So I'm hearing what you're saying about the whole, should I have stayed in my job or just gone for it, right? And I have a friend who's about to start a business of her own, and she's asking me these questions. And I think it's a hard question because I've done both things. And I feel like both things have merit. So it's, I feel like if you just jump in and it's sink or swim time, you push because you have to, right? It's like, shoot, man, I got to make this work because I got rent, I got this, I got the other, right? Like I gotta make it work. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Let me do this, right? But like you said, there's another part of it where, like, if you have that job, you have that cushion, you have that money coming in, but you can also be pretty distracted and feel like your loyalty is to this job. These people are paying me money to do a good job here. So this is like a side hustle, right? And I'm not giving it the attention that it would need to take it to the next level. So I feel like I've done both things, and there's good and bad of both. And I think it depends on what kind of person you are. Like, you know what I mean? Do you thrive on that, like, dude, we're in it, let's go? Or do you thrive on the slow build and you can like keep that going and know you're going to commit yourself in whatever way you've decided to your business while you're working, and you can handle those two things, right? Like, I feel like it has to be about who you are more than like there's a right or wrong answer to it. So I had a really hard time answering this for my friend because I was like, I don't know, man. I've done both. I can tell you the good and bad, and then you got to make your own call.
Yeah. I want to unpack where you're leading us in this conversation, because it's not the action or the motion or the decision. I think it's who you are and the mindset that you are applying with whichever choice that you make. And I think the word loyalty that came up with what you just said, Bev, shows up, at least for me, and it may not be for everybody, and I want you both to jump in and let me know what your perspective is around this. But loyalty showed up in a way when I was in corporate America, where I was more loyal to that business than I was to myself. Like, I thought if I had the wandering eye of wanting to start my business venture, or at least getting things on paper, building relationships or whatever, I was being disloyal to the WNBA or whatever businesses I was in. And if I sit back and look at it now, frankly, the white men that were working in the sports industry, because it's predominantly white men, they were doing that every single day. And they were at the martini bars, Bev, that you talked about in your episode, or the poker parties, having that conversation about, look, let's get together and start this venture. Like, right, my buddy's trying to do this. And while I thought I was being disloyal by just thinking about what my future could hold, I was missing out on opportunities to actually start to build my future while I was in a job that would allow me to do it differently. And so I think we get in our own way as Black women. I think how we show up in the workplace is a really interesting thing to observe, because I think we prioritize everybody else versus ourselves. And I don't think it has to be mutually exclusive. I think we can do both.
I actually think that person we are doesn't shift whether we're in business for ourselves or working for someone else. To your point, Bev, if you're the person that's just going to get out there and you thrive on that kind of adrenaline, you're going to do it regardless. If you're the person who needs that, you need to see the slow, steady build, you will do that. That's going to be you. But in general, if you have an issue with loyalty or putting other people first or putting things first, you'll do that sometimes with your own business. I know I did. And I think sometimes when we didn't make decisions for the benefit of our own businesses. It was because we're saying, well, you know what? I want to make sure that client gets X, or you know what? I don't want this person to think that I'm trying to step in and take over X. And it's the same personality trait. And that's what I had to finally get over. And even just as I coach friends and businesses, just like you, Bev, I have someone right now trying to open a business, and I'm telling her, is it your business or not? Now, if it's your business, then you have to treat it like she was working with someone who was basically kind of stiffing her a little bit. I said, she is dedicated to her business. Are you dedicated to her business or yours? And that was something, though, that I had to learn. And it wasn't necessarily, I listened to your episode, Bev, and I was thinking to myself, I was that person who always thought I belonged up in the front, for some reason or not, right? I was going to be there with the boys somewhere. And I think that's how I got into sports, unlike you two who had actual skills and abilities,
One of us did.
I didn't, well, no, believe me, compared to me, I knew the fellas, right? So that part was simple for me. I never felt that issue with going into the room. It was asking for what I needed once I'm in the room. That was the bigger issue. And saying, I deserve, need, merit, all of those things. So I don't know if when and where you enter, to use a title of an old book, Paula Giddings, I don't know if when and where you enter is as critical as who you are when you do either or.
Exactly. Who you are, how you show up, right? And believing in yourself, that self-love that we've been talking about on a few different Unlocking the Club episodes is so important for us as Black women. We have great ideas. We've shown through time, like that we can do so many things so powerfully. And right, there's obstacles that are in the way. And we all have talked about money, right, and finances. And it's so ironic that money may prevent us from being able to fully lean into an idea that we have, but we hesitate to actually demand what we're worth, right? So finding our worth and our value of like charging the prices for your time was the biggest challenge I had with network sports and consulting. Like, right, some of my smallest clients were the biggest headaches, right? I was getting paid little to nothing. And they were the ones that were blowing up my phone and email and right. And I didn't know what my value was. I didn't trust what I brought to the table. So I was just happy that someone said, yes, like, right, like we want to work with you. And I would like lower my prices before they would ask me to lower my prices, right? I would discount prices before they would even ask me what it would cost to work with me. Have either of you had a similar experience? Like I hear this so often from all entrepreneurs, but particularly women and Black women, is like, I don't want to charge too much because maybe they'll say no.
I've definitely had that issue. I think it's kind of interesting because I've always loved my jobs, and there's this weird guilt that comes in for charging for it, right? So even I'm finding this even with counseling, like I love doing this, and then I have to say to you, give me $100 or whatever I'm charging, right? It's like, I feel like I'm doing what I love. And if I were independently wealthy, I'd probably do it for free, So I have like a little bit of guilt about charging for something I'm enjoying so much, right? And there's also the piece that you said, which is, okay, if I raise my prices, are they going to pay it? Is this worth that, And I struggled with that too at the beginning, cutting my prices before people even asked for it and being like, okay, this is what I have on the website, but this is how much I'm going to actually charge you. Like there is a little bit of wondering, gosh, is it worth that? Am I worth that? And I love what you said about self-love, right? But what I'm learning in counseling also is about self-compassion. Mm-hmm. And it's just like having compassion for yourself, right? Like if, what do I, quote unquote, I hate the word deserve, right? Because it's a worth issue, but it's also like, if I was someone else doing this, you would want that for that person. You'd be like, yeah, she should go get hers, right? Yeah. And when it's yourself, it just feels a little different. So just having compassion and not judging yourself for wanting things that maybe you feel like are too much or too, And so, yeah, I'm learning that piece. Like there's the self-love and then there's also self-compassion. So I'm working on both of those.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've been socialized that way as women in general, right? I mean, just, the data that suggests that if there's a new job that's being posted, and there's 10 criteria they're looking for, if a guy thinks that he can check off one or two of those things, right? He's like, I'm overqualified for this job. And for most women, you're like, okay, if you have 9 of 10, you're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this particular job. And I think we can probably magnify that for Black women, right? Because we don't see enough of us at the table, Mia.
Yeah, we could have 10 of 10 and say, I haven't done it for 5 years, therefore I'm not ready, or we could actually come in and have done that job 3 times over and still feel that we are getting something versus giving something. And, when you were talking a second ago, Bev, about the compassion, I tell my daughter, again, these are lessons I've learned, like give yourself grace. That's something you have to be able to do. Let yourself make a mistake or grow and ask. And the things that I would never demand, I make sure she demands and asks for. And I'm teaching her to be comfortable with the word deserve, because it is something. It is a real thing. If you have done it, you've done the work, you've owned it, you deserve to be paid what you're worth. It's just that simple. And whether or not we walk into that, it does come back to how we've been trained for so long as Black women to be grateful. And if you're coming from the Christian tradition, as Bev and I are, that's the underlying thing for everything. So being able to compartmentalize and put certain things into focus and saying, asking for what I'm worth and deserve does not mean I'm not being grateful when I get it. And, and figuring out how to put that in balance together, because, the first thing you just better be grateful somebody's hiring. That's a little voice in the back of your head initially. And then now I'm like, but wait a minute, does that really make sense? Because like you, Angela, I had some small clients and they would just call you, feel like, I could call you any day, your birthday, your Christmas, whatever, and feel like I own you because I paid you $5. And so it's like, no. And setting the boundaries was key and critical, and learning to say, I'll get back to you later was key, and not feel like I had to jump. But once again, it went back to saying, okay, does it mean I'm ungrateful for this opportunity or the trust or anything if I then say, but this is what I'm worth? And it's a tightrope. It's a tight balance, because you do have to undo and unravel a whole lot that you learned. But I believe it's necessary.
Yeah. It's Alicia Keys, right? Woman's worth. We have to know what we're worth, and we have to give ourselves grace for sure. And I'm noticing, I think that the 3 of us, I'm guilty of this as well, are pretty fluid at being able to give other people advice, like, right? Mm-hmm. And I wonder how much we actually are taking our own advice. I know for myself, it's easier for me to say, Mia, Bev, like, right, Bev, you and I'll get on the phone and I'll be like, boom, 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 boom. Like, right, I'll hang up and I'll be like, wait, who was I? Like, right, like I'm not doing those same things. And so what gets in the way of us actually doing what we know is right? Like, there's still something that we haven't pinpointed that gets in the way of us actually showing up fully with grace and self-compassion and self-love.
That's a tough question, isn't it? I'm going to hand that to Mia. Mia?
The old woman.
She's supposed to close, like, right? She was like, were you the middle hitter?
I did a moment with that.
Like, right?
I still think that comes back to, Angela, some training. I do think it comes back to some indoctrination that we had early, that things were gifts for us, not necessarily earned. A lot of who we bring to the table is first, am I supposed to be at this table? And part of the narrative of being a Black woman or the first Black woman or the only Black woman, there's, you have to go represent and you have to be strong. And then having to feel like you're perfect, once you get into these spaces and places, and, I can't mess up. I can't ruffle any feathers. I can't rock the boat. All of those things end up keeping us stagnant. because we're not really saying, all right, and as you said, taking your own advice, going, okay, I know I would tell her to go out there and, this is set your price and go for it. I would tell me, you need to set your price and go for it. Why aren't you setting your price and going for it? What is it? And what's keeping you from what fear? I was telling her, have you named your fear? What is that fear? What you thinking they won't accept you? Thinking they won't value you? You think it's not enough? And if that's the case, if you think it's not enough somewhere deep down, or you think they're doing you a favor once again by hiring you, no, they're not. Nobody's going to give you money as a favor. And so once we kind of get that in our heads and really sort of reframe that for ourselves, it's a lot easier to, I think, show up for ourselves. But we got to undo some of that programming that said, we're here as a gift. Oh, we've set aside these 10 spaces or diverse, because that's one of my issues with the whole, when they say, oh, we've got this diversity hire, the stigma that's attached to it or whatever it is, even though that person is probably out working or outperforming half of the other people on the staff. But somewhere we're still in, still in believing that it's a gift, that they're giving us something, and it's not.
Yeah. So how do we unlock it?
The loyalty piece you said too, Angela, has stuck with me, right? The loyalty piece, what Mia's saying about gratitude, and like being grateful. It reminds me of athletics, right? Where the athletes were supposed to be the grateful ones. Like how many times we talk about this on Game Changers, right? Where the athletes are supposed to be the grateful, loyal ones, and the owners did not return that loyalty, right? And it's such a great, like metaphor for the slave trade, right? Like, and how many times did we, And so we're coming from a tradition of having been the worker bees and the, the ones that, we do the work, we do the, we're in the trenches, we're like, And I think the idea of like taking on that other spot is a little bit foreign. And it's hard, right? So it's like, oh, I feel as Black women often we're the support, right? We're the ones who kind of get stuck holding bags. You know what I mean? Like, and so stepping out of that, I think is difficult because it has a long history through all sorts of places, right? And so I think it sinks in and it's hard to step out of that.
Yeah. So we have to unlock this club. And it's one of the reasons why we're having these conversations on Unlocking the Club in this podcast, is so we can peel back the curtains and we can actually talk about the real. Like, right, not just the success that we're having, and we all can put together a great speech about, and here's the 5 things that you need to do, but we also need to talk about what shows up for us on a day-to-day basis and how that impacts how we actually are willing to show up in the workplace and workspace, and focus on being owners. It is a mentality, right? I had a friend who said, like his next endeavor isn't to run someone's business, it is to be the business, right? It's to be the owner. We need to find another term for that as well, because I think that has all sorts of things that have us feeling certain kinds of way. But I think we need to incorporate that mindset of, like, you all are amazing at what you do, have great ideas, visions, work incredibly hard, and you are running stuff, like, right? So other people would use different terminology there, but you're running stuff. And we need to remind ourselves and be in conversation with other like-minded individuals to support ourselves in this journey, because it can be rough and difficult. But we need to believe in the possibilities, and it's not going to be easy, right? It's going to be difficult. But we need to unlock this for the next generations, because otherwise there's so many things that aren't changing. The thing that I think can change is how we discuss the journey.
One of the things that, when you're talking about that you've touched upon for me, is that, again, we're solopreneurs and we have the control. This is where we started this conversation. Can you really do it alone? Is the question. Is it really possible to be a solopreneur? You will need some help, because the other side of it is, I don't think necessarily we don't perform or don't. I think sometimes we just get flat out tired.
Yes.
And it's not so much that the business isn't going well or this isn't happening. It's like, no, I just can't do it another day. let's be real about it here. Since, if we're going to talk real, that day when you're like, I just really don't have it.
Yeah.
And we don't give ourselves the time to replenish. We don't, we'll have our tight knit circles where we'll share, but I don't know, even in those circles, are we 100% saying, girl, I literally cannot do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you help me right now? Can you help me? Those are big words.
Yeah.
The smallest words out there, but they're huge.
Right.
And asking for that, I think, is critical. And being able to be transparent and feel supported is also key, because we put a lot of it, even I was listening to us in this conversation on our business acumen and where we fail in our actual abilities, not necessarily our inner selves. And that's what you're going to be working with, Bev, right? Now that self, that piece that needs some rest and restoration and understanding and support and grace again, all of those things. I think until we really hit that piece too, all of the rest is still going to just be spiraling.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. I'm sure people will disagree, but
yeah, I agree with that to some regard. I think that when we think about help, it's not the motion or action of actually asking for help. It's the root cause of your inability to be willing to ask for help. And that goes way back. That goes to what both of you have been alluding to, the stereotype threat, right? Like I know, and Stacy, my business partner with the Dignitas Agency, and I talk about these stories all the time. I know when I was at Stanford, I didn't ask for help in classes. Like I didn't show up at the TA's office or the professor's office and I was a walk-on, but I thought that people who saw me walking in and asked me for help would have been like, oh, that's a dumb jock. She's not capable. She shouldn't have been here in the first place. I know some of my things that I actually have to deal with and overcome is my inability to ask for help has nothing to do with me knowing that I need help, right? Because I'm at that physical and mental exhaustion that Mia just alluded to. But it's, what does this say about me? I take so much pride in my capabilities and the work that I put in and the excellence that we talk about all the time, that being less than or people thinking that you aren't capable is something that maybe I just am not ready to be able to address or handle. And I've had to get over that. Because at the end of the day, most likely they're going to look at me as a Black woman and they're going to think that regardless of what my outcomes and success looks like. So if me asking for help is going to get me closer to hitting the easy button, then let me go ahead and ask that, because they're going to think the same thing about me anyway. Let me get what I need from them.
Yep.
Bev, how about you asking for help? Again, as an elite athlete who always right, it was on you to show up in those moments. Were you able to ask for help?
No. And I will say, it's interesting to hear you talk about the school part, right? And not wanting to ask for help. I have that same thing, but it was not necessarily about what other people would think of me as much as it was me not admitting to myself that this is going badly, right? So I have in my athlete, no, I'm going to make this work. No, this is okay. We're okay. We're fine. Right. And admitting that I need help would mean I have to let go of that. This is not fine. Things are not okay. I'm not good. This is not, and I think I wasn't able to do that then. And so, it's interesting to see if it comes from the outside, what people are going to think, or if it comes from the inside, what am I going to think of myself, right?
Wow. That's, wow.
Yeah. So it matters, because it kind of plays into what you learned growing up and all that stuff, right? About what was important, and how you see the world. So.
And again, perfection is expensive. That is debilitating, right? Is of not trusting yourself enough to make mistakes and be able to recover, puts you in that state of mind, right? Where you're just exhausted because you're constantly on 100, right? And you aren't even giving yourself the chance to pause a little bit. Mia, how has that showed up for you? And how do you navigate that space where you are physically and mentally exhausted?
I finally had to realize I had to just take a break for a little bit and say, I cannot do everything right now at this pace. It'll impact your health. It's going to, and all that money you think you're making, you're going to end up paying it in hospital bills if you keep it up. right? Because it's not, you can't do it. It's just that simple. And I had to take some time and really, really dig deep and say, how can I do this and how can I continue to do this and still be sane and whole? So I did build some community spaces at different points. I would reach out to folks and say, hey, you guys, we need a group. Let's all come together. And I did that at the beginning of this year. I think we've talked about that before. And I don't know if Julie mentioned that. She's in Reset with us. And we started a group. I picked 8 women that I knew who would probably be at that point and be really helpful, but they didn't really know each other. I think I was the only one who knew everybody. But we started in January and I called it Reset. I said, everybody needs a reset right now, because we've all been holed up in the house. All of these things have happened. We've had this crazy violence. There's so much. And it was supposed to only be for 8 weeks, where we met 8 weeks and we had an assignment each week and we would talk and we would go through things. And we are now in July still meeting, and still supporting each other with an ongoing text group. And we made a little symbol that you can put in our text chat if you have to raise your hand and say, you know what, I need, it's SOS, it's 911. This is my 911. I need some support. And we'll all come together. Hey, we need a reset meeting on Saturday. All right, let's do it. And usually most of us show up, and I think it's been very helpful, because just getting to the root and having other folks who have some of the same issues with being Stanford women, being, having those expectations of yourself. That they understand there are a lot of things you don't have to say. Because I think the other part of this is the isolation. We are in a very limited group of folks who have had some of the experiences that we've had, access that we've had, the networks that we have. It's not like you can just turn around and go, girl, to somebody who's just sitting next to you all the time. Let me tell you how it's going today. We're not talking about the laundry here. We're talking about, which is still a big deal, because I got a lot of it to do. But we're talking about things that have gone back for us now, to our college years, 20 years, to pre-college years, when we felt that we had to always perform at this level. And it's not like, we're not coming into this thinking, here's okay. We have always felt that we have to be here. And so you have to have a certain group of support, I feel. Not that other people can't support you and that you can't learn from anybody, but it does make a difference when you have those communities where you can say, look, help me through this. I'm not doing well. And you know what? And then they may even tell you some things about yourself that you don't necessarily want to hear, but you have to hear. And you like, okay, they're like, Mia, you realize you do a lot of community building and then you sit back because you don't want to be up front. And then,
I want to, that's great. I just want to say one thing about that, because what you're saying about the exhaustion piece, right? And the having that group of people that you can rely on, I think it's best to have that group before you fall down, right? Because once you fall down and there's not that group, talk about isolation, about you're in the abyss by yourself. And there's nothing worse than that. So it's like, build your life team while you're still floating, guys. That's just my 2 cents from having done this thing, is build the life team and make it so that it's okay to call you and say, this is not going well. I'm not good. And just open up that line of discussion before you get into the abyss, because that's, at that point, it's late. So that's my 2 cents.
Well, and we have to model it, right? So what is going to be required when you're starting those spaces? I love the concept of reset, right? And one of the reasons reset is probably effective is because there's psychological safety, because you have similar lived experiences. So you don't have to explain yourself, right? Which is exhausting in and of itself. So you're like, I'm not going to go there because I got to explain why I'm here, right? But we, as Black women, and the 3 of us right here, need to model it ourselves. is being able to ask for help when we need it, to say we're not okay. Because if we don't model it, then no one else is going to feel like they have that psychological safety to do so. And it just takes one person in your group, in your networks of your peers to do that, to start to set the tone, right? That this is okay and that this is actually a good thing for us all to be able to do. Otherwise, you do feel so isolated. So I love where you all led us with that. And as you can tell, we can go on and on and on forever in this topic. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship more because it's not just like entrepreneurship is the topic, but I think this correlates to just our lived experience, right? Of being able to ask for help, to have a group of folks that you can talk to and share with, and that are going to tell you the real, right? But that are also going to be there when you need them the most before you need them. They'll be there along the way. Before we pivot and go to the back nine, would love to hear from both of you, just some final thoughts around the entrepreneurial journey as a Black woman. Like, what advice would you have for our listeners as they may either be in the middle of their journey or getting started with their journey or thinking about stopping? Bev, how about you?
I would say, we kind of talked about the failure piece, right? And so I failed a ton before I started making money.
Yeah.
And if I were to talk to myself now in that failure space, I would say, you have no idea how much you're learning from this experience that you are going to be able to apply to the next time you do this. So a failure to me in business is not really a failure as much as it is like a learning experience. And you go, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
I got to do this now. And then if you have the heart to continue and to try again, which is hard after you failed, you can bring all that new knowledge with you. So I would just say, if you're in that space where you're like, I failed, just like, hang on, there's a lot to be learned from that and you can use it.
I think what's so important about that, and I think you've learned it as an athlete because you fail every day as an athlete to a certain extent, like, right, you get used to falling down and having to get back up, is so many of us are fragile. Like, so the first time we fail, like we can't get back up again. And then people talk about being resilient, right, is to be able to overcome and, right, iron sharpens iron. And that's true. I think what Beverly just mentioned is being anti-fragile, is where you actually get stronger as a result of the things that you have to overcome and the failures and the mistakes that you make. Like, so actually, like, get in the game and be willing to try and fail, because you're going to be so much stronger as a result of that than you would if you'd never try. Right? Awesome. Mia, how about you?
I would say, to piggyback on what Bev just said, don't be embarrassed about the failures. Own them. Make sure it's a part of your story. So, because if you try to hide it, you don't get all the benefit from that failure. If you can actually say, you know what, I really messed that up, because you end up trying to hide it from yourself sometimes and going around it. And if you actually say to yourself, ooh, I really messed that one up big time. Let me tell you how. And then somebody else could even say, even at that point, you're still learning. Like you said, Bev, oh, you know what? When that happened to me, I did this. And it makes a big difference. It could be something as simple as your taxes, or it could be something as bad as a bad hire, or it's somebody that you sent to do something for you and like, I did not check them out enough. Whatever it was, but owning it and accepting it and not feeling like this is just, I'm wearing a scarlet letter, I'm wearing a scarlet F, I think helps. And I would also say, just don't expect Waze directions or, the GPS directions. It is not going to be a straight line with, it is going to it's going to dip and it's going to shift and change. So just be ready for the ride.
Yeah. And embrace it. Like, right. Like, that could be the thrill, like, right. That it isn't the same monotonous day to day that, I knew when I was working with the WNBA, what we were doing every February. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was cool. Like, and you get rise to the occasion, but like in it being an entrepreneur, like, it's a roller coaster and you have to make that adjustment. And I would say, like, the two things, and I'm hearing it from what Mia and Beverly just shared as well, is be curious and be open. So being open to the possibilities and the conversation and sharing. I think, again, I am the master compartmentalizer, right? And wanting to have that air of everything's fine. Everything's fine, right? People ask you how you're doing. I'm fine. It's good. Don't let people see you sweat. All those things that we all learn throughout our life. And if you actually say, you know what, like I messed this up, like people may have good insider advice or maybe help you work through a problem, and being open to be part of those discussions and being candid and honest. And it may be in spaces that you feel comfortable and supported. But I think that has changed my life as well. And I think the other thing is being curious is I think part of my mindset of not wanting people to think that I'm not capable was that I didn't ask questions. Like I'd rather go Google it and figure it out on my own versus just in the moment. Like we're not recreating the wheel as entrepreneurs. People have done most of these things. Your idea may be new, but the processes that are required for you to get that idea from idea to execution to building, most of those processes have been done over time. So get curious and ask other people, like, right? Other women, other Black women, other white men. Like you can learn so much by being curious and asking them those poignant questions. And I think that has helped to unlock the club for me to a certain extent. I'm part of this group called the Entrepreneurs Organization. It's a global group. And just having to have, confidential but candid conversations, you learn so much about yourself and how you are actually trying to build your business. And I think we all can do that as we try to unlock the club. But Beverly, Mia, thank you for unpacking and unlocking being Black, being a woman, and being an entrepreneur. Hopefully our listeners heard something, a nugget or two in there that resonated with them, and they'll be able to apply to their passion projects, their side hustle, or the businesses that they're trying to build. But we're not done yet here on Sister Talk. As you can see, Bev, me, and I can talk for hours. And we're not going to go on too much longer, but we're going to come back with the back nine. And each of us is just going to ask the other two a question about something they're curious about. So stay tuned. We'll be right back here on Unlocking the Club with the back nine. Do you want to stop feeling like you have little to no control over your life's journey and instead amplify your life's purpose? You all know me as Angela Taylor, host of the Unlocking the Club podcast, but I am also a business, career, life, and leadership coach, helping my clients to live their best life. Every day, I help my clients discover what they truly want in life, and then unlock the club on how they can live their best life. If you're like many of my clients, you have found yourself over the years prioritizing everyone else and everything else. Your job, your significant other, your family, your friends, your community, the list goes on and on. Well, I'm here to tell you the best thing you can do for others is to invest in yourself. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to succumb to the fear of failure. You don't have to be perfect. You don't need to feel like you're being selfish. You simply need to prioritize you. You may be thinking that coaching is for other people, but trust me when I say that we all could benefit from a good coaching relationship. Together, we'll build a plan to help you amplify your gifts, clarify your goals, and accelerate your journey toward the life you desire, which may be finding financial wealth, spiritual health, relationship success, and/or freedom and flexibility. You no longer have to feel like you aren't welcome into someone else's club. Let me empower you to leverage all of your extraordinary gifts and create your own club. Head on over to unlockingtheclub.com to book a free 20-minute introductory call to learn more about our Unlocking Your Journey coaching packages, or use code UNLOCK to get a 15% discount on the 6-month coaching package. Today is the day to invest in yourself. Let's unlock your journey. All right, welcome back to Unlocking the Club. We're here on the back nine with our co-hosts, Beverly Oden and Mia Jackson. And I'll get us started to give you guys some time. I know I sprung this on you in the last minute, so I'll give you some time to think of a question. But Mia, I'll start with you. Same question for both of you. Who do you have to be the entrepreneur that you want to be? Like I have to be honest and candid with myself. I actually have to show up the way that I show up with my friends and their family. And when I show up that way, I show up powerfully. So who do you have to be the entrepreneur that you want to be?
I would say definitely I have to be honest, but I also have to be a bit more open. And I also have to embrace the fun of it in order to really move forward, because when it all starts to feel like work is when I think it starts to unravel. So I have to make sure that keep the fun forefront, in the forefront.
Yeah. So it sounds like almost like you can't compartmentalize, like, because that's who you are in life. Like, right.
Yeah.
Mia is one of the best relationship builders that I know. And when you're doing that, when you hit your stride, like, right, you're at your best. And so how can you be that way when you're charging folks for the time that you're spending with them? I love
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Bev, how about you? Who do you have to be the entrepreneur that you want to be?
Well, I like what you guys said about honesty and authenticity. I think that's really important. But for me, I think it's about fully stepping into my strengths, right? And just trusting that that's enough, right? And I think part of what I do is kind of observe and see, oh, how is this person doing it? Well, how can I, you know what I mean? And sometimes it's like, just do you, like do it your way and trust that that's good, man. Like that's you. You don't have to be like this person who's done it perfect or the person you think, And so, yeah, I think just stepping into who I am and wherever field I'm stepping into.
Yeah. Well, and I'm reminded, Bev, of what you said in our episode was that you've always felt like you're club adjacent. Like you have this eclectic journey that you're on, and it's trusting in that. Like, right, is like that is enough. It's more than enough. And I think sometimes we get in our own way, and it gets to that internal and external expectations that we have for ourselves, and that we think that others have for us. And I know this is off the cuff. I'm going to give you another second to think of this question. But Bev, this came up in one of our college reunions where there was a panel discussion, and the folks on the panel were asking the question, like, are these expectations that we think people have of us, is it really true, or are we just making that up? Like, right, the three of us have talked about, like, okay, Stanford women, expectations, people think we need to be great, you need to live up to the amount of money that was spent on your education, right? And there's a bit of truth in that, but I wonder how much of that we make up in our own minds versus what people actually expect. So Bev, both of you, just jump in on that if you have any thoughts around that.
I do not think it's in our minds. I do think we internalized it, right? So in that sense, yes, like we accepted that as the rule, right? We went to Stanford, so we've got to do X amount of things. I don't think we made that up. I think it existed in the world. I think every time when I first started working, if I'd make a mistake, they go, you went to Stanford? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like, oh, okay. So I don't get to say anything stupid. I don't get to, make mistakes like that, because it's like, that's the first thing they want to say. And wherever place that's coming from in them, we don't have to go there. But like that, I think weighs on you, and you start to internalize it. Yeah. So I do think it was real, but I don't think we necessarily need to internalize it in the way that we did and like build ourselves around that, because it was unhealthy and it was not helpful.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Yeah, ditto. It is definitely real. There may be, we might add layers to it for ourselves based on who and where we came from. But there is nothing like saying to someone, oh, when they find out you went to Stanford, oh, really? Because you see everything shifts a little bit, right? You get to, oh, and my daughter recently, I was visiting her in her spot, and we were with one of her friends. And I said something about, I got to get her because she just got a new course. I got to get her a new Stanford alumni plate. And she goes, she went to Stanford? And then she goes, she never told us that. And I said, I wonder why, she probably didn't want the pressure, because it does. Even her friend who has been her ace up there was like, all of a sudden, like, wait, what? It shifted something for her, you know. And then she said, literally, "Oh, that explains a lot."
Mm,
And it's like, okay, you know.
yeah.
So it's real and it's out there. It does not go away, but we just have to not layer on it, add to it.
Yeah, yeah. There's a great article that talks about like folks that went to institutions such as Stanford or the Ivy Leagues, like that. So very rarely will they mention where they went to school, like right until they're asked. And it's true,
Yes.
like right. I think all of us have that experience. Just I'll be like, oh, I went to school in the Bay Area, and maybe 10 minutes later somebody will ask me that. But you both say something that I agree with. I think there's different degrees and different circumstances of all of what you both just shared, and I think it's both. And part of what both shows up for me is if I mess this up, somebody that's coming behind me won't have the opportunity. So that's a lot of pressure. Like, right, is how I show up and how I perform, I know will influence and impact who gets an opportunity in the future. And this showed up, like there was an article in the end of the NBA season. And when they started hiring, Darvin Ham was hired for your Lakers, Mia, and Bev, I think now your Lakers again. And he was hired, and he said he was joking with some colleagues and saying, like, if he had been white, he would have been Luke Walton. Like Luke Walton has had like 2 or 3 jobs in the NBA, right? And not a great resume, but he's had multiple opportunities. And Darvin Ham, after it feels like a dozen interviews, is finally getting his chance to be a head coach. And I think that we internalize that, and it's the truth, right? There is data that suggests, like, if you mess up, then you won't get a second chance, and somebody that looks like you won't get a second chance either. So I agree. I think it's a little bit both for inside of all of our identities. Who wants to go? Bev, you have a question for us?
Yeah, just as I was thinking about our histories, our long histories, Mia's 20-year history. Angela, what year are you at?
So I started my first business in 2009.
Okay, so I'm 2008. So we've got a lot of experience, the good and the bad. So my question to you guys is, was it worth it? 1, 2, would you do it again? And 3, what would you tell to yourself as you were starting out from what you know now?
Go ahead, Mia.
No, you go first.
Yeah, no, so this is how we are in real time, like, right? Like when I got an answer, I'm gonna jump in. I would say absolutely worth it. Painful throughout the journey, but where I sit today, worth it for so many reasons. I think I've grown tremendously as a result of it in ways that I wouldn't have if I was working for somebody. I think that I would have probably had to take a long hiatus if I had stayed in corporate America, because it was debilitating. Like, right, the amount of time I was spending trying to please others and prove myself was not healthy at all. I think I can't remember your second question, Bev, but
would you do it again?
If I do it again, I would do it sooner. I would have tapped into my entrepreneurial spirit a little bit early in the process. And probably, in college or something, like, right, just starting little ventures that didn't really matter as much, but were learning journeys. And when I started my first venture, Networks, this was like, I need to be successful because I need to pay the bills. I would have started earlier so I could have made mistakes along the way. So definitely worth it. And the thing that I would tell myself from back in the day, if I had to do it all over again, is a lot of the things that we shared, like, right, be okay with making mistakes. But I would have prepared differently. Like, I would have actually, so much of being able to build your business is about who you know. It's not the volume of who you know, but it's like knowing not who you know, but who knows you. And early on in my corporate career, there are 2 things that I didn't do. I focused on the work, not the relationships. And then when I had the relationships, I didn't leverage those in a way. Again, I thought I was being disloyal if I would have leveraged them to be like, hey, I'm starting this business. Can you help me out? So I made that mistake early on in the process. But I also didn't prioritize myself along the way. There were decisions that I made from a career perspective that I thought people expected me to make. And I didn't prioritize. At the end of the day, making enough money for me to be able to walk away from situations that weren't healthy for me to be able to start whatever it was that I wanted to do. I was prioritizing doing the right thing, people thinking that I was a good person, all of those different things, which led me down a completely different path, and a path that I probably originally was set out to do, which was to work on Wall Street or management consulting, which may have given me some different financial stability to have launched my businesses earlier or a little bit more successfully.
Okay.
Great. Good answer.
Mhm.
Mia,
So the first question was
was it worth it?
worth it. Definitely worth it. I think what I got from being an entrepreneur and a mom was most critical, because trying to be a mom in corporate America was so hard. Just trying to stay on top of everything for work, and that daycare dash was not fun. So just like, okay, you can't stay late with everyone in corporate. So therefore you feel like you're missing something, but then your kid is like, you're late picking me up, all the time. And so it was just way too hard. So it was definitely worth it for me. And it gave me the flexibility to make moves for my kid that I wouldn't have been able to make if I were just still working for someone. When I wanted to move her to a more diverse area, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I were just looking for a job. I'm like, all right, we're picking a city, let's move. And we moved. And so we moved from the Bay to DC. That was a flexibility that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So definitely worth it. I'd do it again. I'd do some things differently. Unlike you, Angela, I think the only reason I did have a job a lot of times is because I had good relationships, because I knew the people, and even still some of those people to this day still bring me business. And so but what I did not do with those relationships, I didn't know how to leverage them without having that guilt that you talked about. Like, do I feel like I'm abusing this? Not realizing that, or even if I won't even say not realizing, because that would be a lie. I did realize sometimes that I would watch some of the guys who I knew, like, oh yeah, I called up Joe, and because I wanted him to meet with me because I got this business idea. And I'm like, well, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I call him about that? I was more than comfortable checking in. Hey, how are you? Let me tell you what's going on here. Check this out. And they would give us support here and there, but I was never comfortable saying, but I need this exact kind of support from you right here, right now. So that's something I would definitely do differently. All the relationships that I've had, I would definitely leverage differently. And I would build in more fun. I would build in just time to, like, I have a friend who takes off a month every year, an entrepreneur. And she said, I had to learn to do that for myself, because if I didn't, I would never go anywhere. I would never see, my friends and my people. And so she said, if it's something urgent while I'm gone and traveling, or while my out of office button is on, I can still do it. It's not that I won't ever do anything, but I set aside that time so that I can really just even breathe, basically. So I would probably take that to heart and build in a little more fun and just have some fun.
So good.
That is so good. Like, right, there's so many win-wins in the situation, particularly around relationships. So often we think if we're making an ask, it's a one-sided ask, but just knowing who we are, there's a win for everybody in whatever it is that we're trying to create. And we need to trust ourselves in that process, for sure. No, I love that. Bev, like, you don't get off the hook. What is your response? Like, was it worth it to you? Would you do it again? And what would you tell yourself?
Yeah, I was definitely worth it. I think looking back, there were some moments where I felt it was not. Some low moments, right? And I don't think we should gloss over that, because if you're going to be an entrepreneur, there are going to be some low moments where you don't think it's worth it. Moments where I think, God, I maybe should have quit that then. And so, you know what I mean? Like, they held on too long. And so, yeah, when I look back on it now, I definitely think it was worth it. I love the flexibility, right? And Mia, what you're talking about having a child, I can't even imagine what you went through trying to start a business or start trying to be in the corporate space, raising your child, making those big decisions. Every decision probably had so much more weight on it than like me, my little single self, right? Like that I can be like, it's just me, So I have the like ultimate respect for the fact that you were able to do all this and raise beautiful daughters. Good job. But yeah, so I would do it again. I would do it again differently. I do think that first jump in, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was just like, I can do this. I'm just going to take it on. And I had no clue what it took to start a business. Okay. And sometimes I wonder if I had known, if I would have done it. And I don't know if I would have, because I don't think I realized how hard it was really going to be.
Yeah.
And so I think I would have put a little more time into the development phase that first time in. And I think I maybe overcompensated in that area later, right? Where it was like, okay, I'm not doing that again. So let me read and read and read and get all this information, and I'm not moving forward, right? So I think I did, again, both things. Like I do the pendulum swing, right? So there's a sweet spot in there that I think I'm finally getting, right? Where it's like, okay, I can learn some stuff, but I don't have to like delay, because of the fear of, I'm not ready, right? So I think that's what I would tell myself is just, it's like we say in therapy, ride the waves, right? Like, it's like, it's going to be up and down. There's going to be some hard moments. There's going to be some joyful moments. You're going to have successes and failures, and it's all part of it.
Yeah. It's life, living life. You learn your lessons. And I think that the happy medium that you're speaking to, Beverly, is using other people's money. Like, right, what we have to unlock, and we're gonna talk about this on this show on Sister Talk, is access to capital for Black women and Black entrepreneurs. Like that has to change. Like when you are making a choice between spending $1 on marketing or having food on the table, it's a completely different decision. And I know there's a lot of people that have ideas that aren't as significant as either the ideas that anybody in this screen has, but they have access to capital, and the risk isn't as risky because it didn't work. I still have food on the table. I still have my car. My kids are still in school. I still have their college tuition paid for. It makes a big difference. And so that is one of those things. And it's not because people don't have good ideas. It's not because people don't pay back, right? Creditors or debt. It's because people don't see us. And it's because we aren't in those seats that are making decisions on who we're giving access to capital. I mean, we all saw it. We're not getting into politics. We saw somebody that has gone bankrupt multiple times, getting tens of thousands of millions of dollars time after time. We have to unlock that system. But let me get off my soapbox. Mia.
Because we're gonna start. If you go down that hole, that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. So my question to both of you: where do you see your businesses in the next 5 years?
You go first, Angela.
I hear some new co-hosts or somebody jump in. Next episode, Angela's going second in this question. But no, in fairness, I did spring this on Beverly and Mia at the last minute, so it is my responsibility to jump in. I actually just had to, for my entrepreneur organization cohorts, I just had to write a letter to myself or to my colleagues 10 years from now, I think it was. And it was like an example, somebody hit you up on social media, and you haven't been interacting with them, get them up to speed on what's going on. And in essence, what I said was, continue to scale the businesses. Beverly and I, 2 years ago, like right before COVID started, we had been in the conversation about how we're going to scale our businesses. Like we're really excited coming out of those conversations, had some really detailed plans, and then all heck broke loose. But scaling the businesses for the Dignitas agency with Stacey Parson and myself, we have some really exciting things in the hopper that are, for me, legacy work. And I think what I'm realizing is legacy has always been important to me, but it's even more important now for me that my mother passed, right? And that my siblings and I, none of us have children, So the businesses I create, the impact I have is my legacy. Like the businesses are my children to a certain extent. And so work is extremely important. So Dignitas want to continue to grow that work that we're doing and have an impact on individuals and corporations. For Indulge Boise, my food tour business, I'm hoping to, again, grow that business back to where it was pre-COVID and possibly sell it or sell a stake in that business for somebody that has the time and energy to focus on that. And then there's a lot of things that I want to do with my platform to be able to share these stories and impact young Black women and girls through stories. And so with Unlocking the Club, I'm really excited about the future in phase 2 and phase 3 of Unlocking the Club.
Beautiful. I'm excited about that too.
I'll be part of it. Stay tuned. You'll get that text. What are you guys doing? That's coming down the pipeline.
That's right. So I am transitioning careers. So when you say that, it launches me on a whole new trajectory, right? Like the what I was thinking 5 years ago, right? Pre-COVID about what I was going to do. Angela said it. We were sitting in Coronado in San Diego planning out what our businesses were going to be. And it just changed like in an instant. Yeah. And so now I'm getting my degree in counseling. I graduate in December. Praise God, please let that happen. And then I'm going to go into getting licensed. So it's 2 years. I have to earn 3,000 hours. And then, so the next 3 years after that will be building my new business, right? And so what I think now, it may change, but what I think now, I love working with trauma. And so I love working with athletes and I love working with the body. And so I'm learning a lot of different modalities. One of them is called somatic experiencing, which is all about experiencing your body and how trauma gets stored in the body and being able to release that. And I think we as Black women have a lot of stored up trauma. And so I would love to work with African Americans. I would love to work with athletes. I would love to work with people who've been through trauma to kind of start to release and kind of process some of that stuff. And so you can move on to a better future that's not like holding on to all these things from the past. So I'm really excited to work with people and to be able to make that kind of difference. I think, Angela, you were saying at the beginning about being happy in your job but not being fulfilled. Yeah. And this is something that is really fulfilling work. And so I'm just super excited to learn more and to practice and to kind of figure out exactly where I fit and how I'm going to mold these modalities into what I'm doing and become like, you know, the me that's going to be 5 years from now. I don't know. And being open, like you said, open and curious about what that's going to be and not have an agenda about it. So that's where I'm at.
Okay. I'm excited for you for so many reasons, because I do think you have such an interesting perspective to offer clients in the community, particularly athletes, but around racialized trauma and those sorts of things. You know, for us as Black women, we oftentimes so heavily focus on our action and our activity, what we do, and not the somatic process of how we feel. We ignore that, right? And this happened with the George Floyd murder, right? Is like, if that had been in normal times, where on a Monday morning, we would have to show up in the workplace, smile on our faces and sitting at the table ready to perform. And we would have ignored all of that trauma that was going on. So I think it's really important work, excited that you're doing it. And I have no doubt that the journey that you've been on, like riding that wave, has led you to what is probably your life's purpose. And I think that if we all trust ourselves, all the things, ups and downs that we go through are leading us to where we're supposed to be.
Well said.
Yep.
Mia, how about you?
Okay. Real quick, the book, a couple of people have recommended it to me, Bev, The Body Remembers.
It's The Body Keeps the Score.
Keeps the Score. Okay, yes. Yeah.
It's by Bessel van der Kolk, and it's really, really good.
Okay.
If you've been through trauma, though, just a slight warning, it's rough.
Okay.
Because it takes you back to all those things that were going on in you, but it really explains how it's stored in the body. Yeah, so it's really good book.
So what was that book again? It was The Body Keeps the Score?
Body Keeps the Score, Bessel van der Kolk.
Okay.
Yeah, a couple of people have recommended or talked about that book actually, because I have some friends who are doing somatic body work in a different way than you are, but definitely same process. And they're working with military folk. So, yeah. And one of my clients is actually a therapist and has been doing it for years. There are 3 Black women who work here together. So I definitely want to put you in touch with them.
Please.
Yeah, I will do so. And so for me, in 5 years, I think Doro will still be happening. I am not sure though, if I'm honest. Will I take a pivot? Because I want to do more writing. I think it's something that I've put on the back burner for a long time, but I do realize I like building brands. I think my building, if it's still here, which I'm pretty sure it'll be here as long as I'm here, but if I'm still here, I think I'll have a different client base.
Yeah.
I will definitely be a lot more intentional about who and what I bring into the business. I want to see it on a different level. I think I was there for a while, then dipped back, as we said, that whole thing. I was there. I want to go back to space. It's kind of weird because I do want to go back to somewhere I was before in the business, where I was actually growing it at a level that in a way I wanted to. And I want to get back to that. There are a lot of other things that impacted that, but that's another show. So that's something to deal with at another time. But I definitely like to do that. And I don't know if I will be still in the States. So I'm really considering, or at least if I'm not in the States, I mean, if I'm in the States just part-time, maybe half year, half somewhere else, I'm ready to explore a bit more of the world. So I'd like to take the business a bit more outside of this, because I think up until now, I've really kept everything US based. And I'm like, well, there's a big world out there. So I'd like to see Doro expand with at least, hey, give me one international client so I can travel.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome.
So that's it.
No, that's exciting. And similar to the fact that Game Changers Lives lives in us, right, in different ways and how we show up in conversation, regardless of what the next iteration of Doro marketing will be, the metamorphosis will be powerful, and that will live in all of the work that you do, right? It is, you're embodied in all of the things that you've been able to create, that mission-driven work that you've been able to do with your clients over the years, and really excited for both of you to see what that next iteration is. I think one of the things that COVID has taught me is, we're not promised tomorrow, right? And so to make the most of every moment that we have with each other, with ourselves, with our dreams, because we can't take them with us, right? And so I think we just have to lean in and try and remember that perfection is expensive, and fail safe. And there's no one else I would rather fail safe with than the co-host today, Beverly Oden and Mia Jackson. Thank you both for joining us for this episode of Unlocking the Club, a little sister talk. There's a little play on words. It's sister talk and sister talk, right? And you can tell each of us as sisters, we can talk. And we will have this sort of special episode from time to time on a regular basis or semi-regular basis, when we can catch up with each other's and align schedules. But we have a lot of insight and perspective to share on a bunch of different topics, and we look forward to bringing those topics to you here in the near future. Again, Beverly and Mia, any last words that you have, or any projects that you want to share with our listeners, or letting them know where they can find you? Mia, how about you?
Oh, right now, hopefully I will have something for you to read soon. But right now, you can find me either on Instagram at Mia M. Jackson, or I'm rebuilding my website, so it should be up by the time this comes out. So doromarketing.com.
Awesome. And we will have that information in our show notes as well and post. Beverly, how about yourself?
Yes, I will be launching a website coming up soon. maybe the next time we get together, I will give you that information so that people have it. But yeah, just you can find me on Twitter at @BevOden. And yeah, it's I'm not on there a ton. I'm not a social media person, but I do love to be able to be in contact with people all over the world. So I do see those messages. If y'all have anything for me, any questions about trauma, crisis, I'm doing EMDR. If you guys haven't heard of that, that is really interesting type of modality. And Black people, right? And our experience in America. Mia, I'm with you. I'm going overseas, man.
Mhm.
That's coming in there too at some point. I would love to live overseas for a little bit while. So international is the way to go.
Yep.
But yeah, so website coming soon. So next time I'll promote that.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to hearing what's next for both of you in the near future. We will have more conversations and sister talk with Beverly Oden and Mia Jackson here on Unlocking the Club. But until then, thank you all for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you find your podcasts, so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear all about our future guests. You'll have access to special features, and you'll be able to connect with this amazing Unlocking the Club community, where we all want to share what's going on, where we can be open and honest and transparent and help each other continue to unlock the club. So head on over to Unlocking the Club on your favorite platforms, listen to our previous episodes, and until then, be well. Thanks again for joining us on Unlocking the Club.
Thanks for listening to Unlocking the Club. If this conversation resonated with you, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or your favorite streaming platform so that you can experience every episode. And follow us on social media, where you'll hear about future guests, access special features, and connect with this amazing community. Head on over there and let us know how you are unlocking the club. Until next time, peace.